Okay, so last time we were talking about atoms and molecules and how water and sodium chloride are completely different in how they bond. Like I mentioned, sodium and chloride, when they come together and they produce sodium chloride, you produce a cation and an anion. The cation is the positively charged sodium and the anion is the negatively charged chlorine, which you can get from my previous video. Now what you will also find in that video is that I mentioned something about how oil is not soluble in water. The reason that is because oil is a non-polar substance and water is a polar substance. What that means is it changes how the electrons actually interact with each other between the different atoms. In the case of oils, you have a long chain of carbon and hydrogen bonds. What that is when you look at a periodic table, which has a list of all of the elements, and they're what we call an electronegativity. The electronegativity tells you how much of the electrons get pulled by a particular atom. And if that electronegativity difference between the two atoms is over 4, you will have what we call an ionic bond, and one of the atoms will just steal the electron completely from the other atom, creating an ionic bond. With a covalent bond, you have polar and nonpolar. And in the case of the carbon and hydrogen, the electronegativity difference between the two is almost 0. It's almost negligible. That's why we call it nonpolar. In the case of oxygen and hydrogen, oxygen is highly electronegative, so the difference between the oxygen and the hydrogen atom electronegativities is far greater than 1.5 and is still below 4. So it doesn't quite form an ionic bond, but it still has some polarity to it. Because the two substances have totally different electronegativities, they change their polarity and won't dissolve in the other. This leads to the oil having a lower density than the water, and it brings the oil to the top when you mix the two. But there are certain cases where if you stir the oil and the water, which I might show you guys later on, that if you mix oil and water really thoroughly, you might have some pieces of oil or some bits of oil that will actually mix in water. And the way to do that, which is similar to how soap works, is it reduces, when you stir it, it reduces the surface tension between the different water molecules, which allows for some of the oil to become dismissible in it. Subscribe to me and you will see a new video weekly. Please subscribe. Please. Just maybe.